Hello, and welcome back to another fun-filled episode of the Hammercast. I'm your host, Alex, the Hebrew Hammer Salkin, and today is a very monumental day. Today is the 100th episode of the Hammercast. And as fortune would have it, good luck, circumstance, whatever you want to call it, today is also the day that StrongFirst has released my article about how to prepare for the snatch test if you are going into the SFG2 kettlebell certification. Now, this is a little bit more of an advanced protocol, but I figured I would talk a little bit about the snatch test in general, given that this is the 100th episode and the snatch test is 100 reps. It just seemed like the right thing to do. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Before we get into that, I want to make sure that I mention that one of the things that I think is very important, really for anything pertaining to kettlebell training or calisthenics training, is that you lay down a good, strong foundation of full body movements that you can add to whatever your current training is so that you can get stronger, fitter, more resilient, improve your coordination, so on and so forth. And to that end, I highly recommend my 9-minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge. It is just a few movements that are non-exhaustive. And again, you can apply them to any program that you're doing, and they're in most cases going to enhance it, or at the absolute least are not going to interfere. But most of the people who have told me that they've done it have said that they've definitely noticed improvement in their training overall, as well as their energy levels and all sorts of other things. So if you want to get a free copy of that, just go to 9minutechallenge.com and it is all yours. All right. Now, what I want to talk about next is the snatch test. And I want to break it down a little bit more because the article that I wrote is a bit more advanced, because it is taking movements that you're going to be training for SFG2. It's using those within the program itself. If you go to StrongFirst's website and you look up my name, you should be able to find the article. But the thing is that a lot of people who are not SFG2s might feel like, whoa, now I'm really excited. I'm pumped up. I want to work up toward the snatch test, because it is a very, very good test of general strength and conditioning and mental fortitude and what have you. For gentlemen, it is 100 snatches in 5 minutes with a 53-pound kettlebell or a 24-kilogram kettlebell. And for ladies, it is 100 snatches in 5 minutes with a 16-kilogram kettlebell or a 35-pound kettlebell. Now, there are a lot of programs floating around out there that are going to purport to help you to achieve it. And I have no question that there are a lot of paths to reach it. Like the old saying goes, all roads lead to Rome. But some roads are going to be a bit smoother and a lot more enjoyable. And so I think that my article on the snatch test is one of those roads. Now, the thing to keep in mind, however, is that if you're an enthusiast and you're not already an instructor, maybe you want to become an instructor, what you need to keep in mind is that there are a couple of things that you're going to need to get out of the way before you even attempt snatches. And first things first, what I would say is you're going to need overhead mobility. Now, this shouldn't come as a huge surprise to anybody. This is really pretty straightforward. But a lot of people just kind of want to rush into it without really focusing on their mobility. And if you can put your hand over your head with the shoulder pulled into the socket and hold that position with no wailing or gnashing of teeth or letting your head jut forward, you're in a good position. If not, you're definitely going to want to work on your overhead mobility. That's a topic that's a little bit too in-depth for me to go into right now, but suffice it to say, one thing you might consider doing is just doing a bit more hanging. Now, this isn't the only thing that's going to help with your overhead mobility, but it is a big thing. And a lot of people find it to be hugely helpful. In fact, just the other day, I had an online session with an online student of mine, and we're working on his military press. And in between presses, what I had him do was do some hanging. And he said he felt a lot smoother, a lot easier. It was like less internal resistance to do the move. So that's number one. Number two, this is a perfect segue, would be the military press. Now, a lot of people like to treat the Turkish get-up as like a beginner move. So it's like, your introduction to kettlebell training would be swings and get-ups. And I actually don't really think that the get-up is good for beginners at all. I know this might sound heretical, but the fact is it's like 7 moves in one direction. And if you want to talk about going back down to the ground, it's another 7. So it's like 14 steps to do one exercise. Nothing about that is beginner at all. That's an intermediate movement. Okay. Now, I would still say you need to do the Turkish get up if you want to get really good at the overhead position. No question about that. But the first step that I would take is actually learning the military press. It's just 2 steps. It's 1, you get the kettlebell in the rack position by your chest. And 2, kettlebells overhead. Voila. It really is that simple. Obviously, there is more technique involved, but if you work on that, that's going to give you a good basis for strength, including in your shoulder girdle in general, as well as your ability to navigate the overhead position. And because there's a bent arm component, meaning your elbow has to bend during the movement, that's a little bit closer to what you're going to have to do with the snatch, because the elbow will have to bend in order for you to tame the arc or control the path that the kettlebell is going through. So definitely make sure that you have not skimped on your military presses. It's going to come in very, very handy. Now, again, this is for the overhead component of it. We can't overlook, however, the other extremely, in fact, I don't know if I would say more important, but I would say equally important part, which would be explosive hinging movements. So without question, you need to get good at swings. Now, one issue that I have with people talking about preparing for snatches is that they treat the snatch as a swing that ends up overhead. And, my friend Dave Whitley likes to use that analogy to get people to understand. And there's truth to it, because you definitely have to swing the kettlebell, as it were. But there are a few more steps in the snatch that makes it a little bit different from the swing. So it's not just that the bell keeps going. There's more to it than that. But suffice it to say, you need to be very good at swings. But I would also say that because taming the arc is so important, swings don't really require that much taming of the arc. It's just you hold on to the bell and that's it. Meaning there's no, elbow bending and stuff like that. At least if you're doing the swing properly. So for that, I would also highly recommend that you spend some time getting good at the clean and at the high pull. Now, these movements are not progressions to the snatch, they're prerequisites, meaning that they are techniques that are worth practicing in their own right, and they set the stage for the snatch, but they're not the same as snatch progressions. Those are different. And again, beyond the scope of this podcast, but still very relevant. So far we've got overhead mobility, military press, swing, clean, and high pull. Now, the next thing that I want to point out is that, the snatch is typically viewed as a conditioning exercise. And to be very frank, I think the snatch has there's kind of 2 sides to it. Now, one of them is obviously the conditioning side, because it is really superior to that end. But then the other one is explosive power and strength. And I think that's been de-emphasized by a lot of people. And so one of the things that I see when I look at programs that purport to help you prepare for the snatch test is that a lot of times they really just focus on radical amounts of volume, sometimes to the detriment of your actual technique or even your shoulder health. I have there's a gal who was on my podcast not too long ago, Shannon McNutt. We did an episode together talking about how I prepared her for her SFG2. And she had an instructor who told her to do 300 snatches with her snatch test bell once a week in order to prepare for the snatch test. And all it did was jack up her shoulders. Now, she has a very physically demanding job. So, for her, she had multiple things to deal with. She had to deal with, her regular kettlebell training, a lot of which has to be overhead, just because that's, what a lot of the kettlebell movements are. It's overhead movements. And then she cleans houses for a living. And so that's a lot of use of the upper body and the shoulders in particular in cleaning. And even just one day a week of these 300 snatches with her snatch test bell really jacked her shoulders up. So it didn't really do her any favors, and ultimately ended up being something that, it's a strategy she just can't use. And I think there are more people like her than not, meaning I don't think that it's a very wise decision for most people. It just, as Pavel has pointed out, snatches take a lot out of you. So if you overdo it on them, or you're not really, really prepared for them, doing 300 with something that you only have to do 100 with in your training, it can be a bridge too far for a lot of people. So I do think that the conditioning side is important, but I think that once you get the technique down and once you are comfortable with it, to me, what actually makes more sense is to start snatching heavier than what you would need to. Because if you can snatch heavier, even just a little bit heavier, you can definitely snatch lighter. The problem that I ran into when I was preparing for my first ever snatch test, or really the one that was being counted. I mean, I had done it a few times before I arrived at the certification weekend. It was in October of 2010 in Orlando, Florida, when I was going through my RKC. And I couldn't snatch anything heavier than a 24 kilo kettlebell. So when I had to snatch it 100 times in 5 minutes, most people say that they think that the snatch test is not the hardest part of the weekend. For me, it was, because I just didn't have the strength to do anything more than 24 kilos. Now, I nailed the snatch test, and I did it with some time to spare, but it really took a lot out of me. I mean, it was a really, really tough experience. Next time that I had to recertify it, I'd started snatching a bit heavier, so it was not as difficult. And then by the third time that I had to recertify, I was snatching even heavier yet. And so this was kind of where my approach started to take place and started to bloom. And I think that the latest iteration of it, which I will say right now is maybe not the best for people who are going through SFG 1, just because it requires some higher level skills that they're not going to be tested on. Again, you can read about it in my SFG2 prep plan on StrongFirst's website. But nevertheless, heavy snatching still takes a precedence in this program. I'm not going to tell you everything that's in it, because I want you to actually read the article. But suffice it to say that if your goal is that you want to pass the 100 rep snatch test, then what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to learn how to snatch heavier, and you have to work your way up to it. So in summary, to go back through everything once more, I would say first and foremost, make sure your overhead mobility and your overhead strength are in order. So for overhead mobility, there are a variety of things that you can do. Again, it's beyond the scope of this podcast to talk about, but hanging would be a good one to start with. Really is very helpful for a lot of people. For the overhead strength, I would say military presses, number one, and then after that, Turkish get-up. For the ballistic element of the snatch, get good at swings, particularly one-arm swings, get good at cleans, and then high pulls. Again, all of these are on this progressive pulling continuum. See, these are not progressions to the snatch. These are prerequisites to the snatch. And then finally, just conditioning only from my experience is not as important as raw power and brute strength. If you've got that, it is a lot easier to get improved conditioning. If you don't have it, you're going to have to work a whole lot harder. Your body just may not be ready for it. All right. So those are some insights that I think that you will find very helpful if you ever decide you want to do the 100 rep snatch test. I have a couple of free articles on StrongFirst website that you can check out to that end. I actually have a short-term challenge called Conquer the Snatch as well. If you're interested in that, it gives you an actual program that would show you how to use even just snatching once a week, but doing other kettlebell ballistic drills during the week. It helps you to work on improving your snatch strength and speed and familiarity with the movement and all that other good stuff. So feel free to reach out, ask me about that if you'd like, and I would be happy to point you in the right direction. So I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Thank you for listening all these 100 episodes. I'm looking forward to the next 100 and then the 100 after that, and so on and so forth down the line. Thank you again. Have a great day. And as always, have fun and happy training.